Call the meeting to order. We could have a roll call. Oh, I'm sorry, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance first. Mr. Mastercola, I think you have some guests here for us.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Tonight, we have two students to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. First, we have Kaylee Law. She's a junior student from Lowell. She's enrolled in the Health Assisting and Pre-Nursing Program. She's a member of the National Technical Honor Society and peer tutors. We also have a Parity Tooch, who is a junior student from Lowell. She's enrolled in the Health Assisting and Pre-Nursing Program. Also a member of the National Technical Honor Society, is a peer student, peer tutor, and also enjoys doing community service with the school. Please welcome Kaylee and a Parity to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, they're
You?
By the way, you went to.
Oh, thank you, ladies. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good job. Thank you very much. Good job. Yeah, they're good. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you. Yeah, were you nervous?
Thank you.
Someone has it.
Okay, Mrs. Gosselin, if we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Tatsias?
Here.
Mr. Gigi?
Here.
Mr. O'Hare?
Here.
Mr. Sheehan?
Here.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Bahu?
Here.
Mr. Booton?
Here.
Mr. Lemay?
Here.
Okay, Mr. Moran, I don't know if anybody has signed up to speak publicly.
Who no public appearance tonight.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Next on the agenda is school committee communications. Does anybody have any school committee communications?
Bless you.
Okay, nothing at this time. Thank you very much. And then after that, we're going to have our report of our student representative.
NTHS members are planning to run their 4th annual Valentine Flower Gram fundraiser. They will sell flower grams during lunch periods. Students will be able to write a note that is attached to the flower and then deliver the flower in person or have an NTHS student deliver the flower to the recipient's homeroom the next morning. They expect to sell at least 400 flower grams over 2 weeks. Our annual Empty Bowls painting event is scheduled to take place on Wednesday, January 16th after school. Students will paint soup bowls that will be donated to the Empty Bowls event to help raise funds for Living Water Center of Hope, an outreach center in downtown Lowell where help, hope, and healing is offered to anyone in need. Our culinary program will also be donating soup. The Greater Lowell Math Club joined the New England Math League this year. The league promotes the enjoyment and study of mathematics by organizing contests for grades 4 through 12. These contests help to enrich mathematic programs. The league requires student members to participate in 6 math exams. Our student members recently took the 4th exam on Tuesday, January 18th after school. On top of that, they participated in the Bay Path Math Meet in November, and our team of students came in 7th out of 19 teams. Congratulations. The Skills USA in-house award ceremony will be held on Thursday, February 7th in the lecture hall at 6:30. All students preparing to compete at the district competition in March will be recognized. The Sophomore Class Committee will continue to meet to discuss possible after-school activities, guest presenters, and ways to improve school spirit. The committee is also discussing an end-of-the-year activity for sophomores who have volunteered and contributed to school events. The boys and girls basketball teams have had their typical success thus far, with the boys currently at 6-2 and the girls at 8-2. Both saw good results in their respective holiday tournaments as the boys downed North Reading and the girls captured wins over Pelham, New Hampshire, as well as defending New Hampshire D2 state champion Hollis Brookline. Swim and Dive has been among the top teams in the league this season and took to be primed to make a run at the state vocational championships on January 30th and 31st. Indoor track has continued to build in their second season as a program and will look to qualify runners for the MIAA state meets in February. The cheer team will look to build off the fall season and compete for the CAC Winter Championship and a spot at D1 North Regionals. They will also be performing at boys varsity basketball games this season. The Griffin Wrestlers swept up their most recent quad meet on January 5th, pinning down wins over Salem, Reading, and Waltham. The team features a number of underclassmen and looks to be rounding into form for the state vocational and MIAA sectional meets in the coming weeks. Congratulations to student athlete Emily Goglia for being one of the 37 finalists in the Student Sportsmanship Essay Contest conducted by the MIAA. This year's hundreds of students across the Commonwealth participated in the contest with the theme, "How do I model sportsmanship and how will it support my future success in today's world?" We are very proud of Emily.
Thank you, Maya.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you,
night.
Maya. We appreciate you coming in and
Thank
doing
you.
that for us.
Have a good one.
Okay, next on the agenda, the approval of minutes from December 13. Motion by Mr. Moran, seconded by Mr. O'Hare.
Mr. Tatsias?
Yes.
Mr. Gigi? Yep. Mr. O'Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Bahu?
Yes.
Mr. Booton?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
And then there'll be a approval of warrants. If we could have a motion to waive the reading. Mr. Moran, seconded by Mr. Booton. Roll call.
Mr. Tatsias?
Yes.
Mr. Gigi?
Yes.
Mr. O'Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Bahu?
Yes.
Mr. Booton?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Okay, motion to approve the expenditures for the sum of $3,260,076.72. Motion by Mr. Sheehan to approve, as well as seconded by Mr. Tatsias. Roll call.
Mr. Tatsias?
Yes.
Mr. Gigi?
Yes.
Mr. O'Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Bahu?
Yes.
Mr. Booton?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is our report of general counsel. There's nothing on the agenda, so we'll just move on. After that, there will be a report of our superintendent director.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Tonight, first on the agenda is a donation from Tingsboro resident Barbara Roach. It's a 2000 Jeep Grand Cherokee to be used in the automotive department for a variety of instructional purposes. The value is $1,600.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion to approve?
So moved,
By
Mr. Chairman.
Booton, seconded by Mr. Moran. Roll call.
Mr. Tatsias?
Yes.
Mr. Gigi?
Yes.
Mr. O'Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yeah.
Mr. Bahu?
Yes.
Mr. Booton?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Second item on the agenda, back in June, committee member Bahu had requested some research and a report by my office for the probability of potentially adding modular classrooms to our campus and to look at some feasibility of developing alternate academic programs here at the high school. I had a few meetings with Mr. Bahu to get an idea of the type of things that he was looking at and some of the research he was bringing to light. I know he had done some research at the state level and talked to some people about it. I put together a very basic potential, far from even feasibility report on what we may need to think about, let alone put on paper for something like this to be in fruition. There's a disclaimer, there's a lot to be worked out if we would even go to the next step. I would foresee you would ask me to produce another report, which would be like a pre-feasibility report. I have much more research to be thorough on this type of report, but I wanted to add something that I spent some time with some of my administrators looking at. Again, I want to caution, this is far from being a final report, let alone a feasibility report. But the opportunity to create, obviously, a STEM academy around that idea that Mr. Bahu brought up that would accelerate academic vocational pathway programs for our students from our 4 sending districts. The project would be an advanced STEM academy that would serve students who are interested in academic coursework. Students would be required to complete the College Board Advanced Placement subjects, ELA, math and science, to complete a 3-year foreign language requirement also. The approach would be interdisciplinary learning. Teams of technical and academic teachers would collaborate to identify problems, create solutions, and meet frameworks and standards about subjects. Critical thinking and analyzing and simulation would be a big part of the research. The proposal of the Advanced STEM Academy would focus on a small number of technical pathways. Those would be that we have at our school: information technology, healthcare, engineering, and biotech, which would also include environmental science and green engineering. We did a little research, and with those pathways would meet regional labor, Northeast labor market blueprint as of March 2018, so the job and co-op placement would be there. Some of the components of where this would be held, obviously, modular classrooms would potentially be one. We also looked at the opportunity to be able to use our existing labs to facilitate this. On page 5 is a potential schedule of what the student in this particular program would go through. If you look at just the 9th grade, they're doing advanced English, and advanced algebra 2, and advanced biology, or world history, foreign language 1. Their tech major, whatever one of those 4 pathways would be, and obviously PE. Enrollment would be somewhere around 240 students. I mean, that's something that can be worked out as we move forward. It could be less, more, according to, obviously, a budgetary process. Obviously, the focus on STEM, science, technology, and engineering, would be the premise. If you move on to page 6, dual enrollment in college credit, AP coursework would be a huge component of this type of endeavor if we were to go forward with this. And obviously, having an advisory board made up, a separate advisory board made up of industry employers, post-secondary partners, and local community leaders would be important to a success. On page 7, I've listed probably 6 or 7, 8 questions of probably 150 questions that we could have added there. But some of those questions, I mean, do we start with few students, such as 25 to 30, to see what happens as a pilot, and then maybe do 2 technical programs? Do we add the A to STEM and make it a digital art component? That was something that we thought about. How many students do we admit? Do we have to work on our admissions policy based upon this type of endeavor? Yeah, we would have to. There would be a change to the admissions policy, obviously. Do we offer an exploratory program? How do we use our lab space? Actually, some of these questions helped us to think a little bit about our existing program, so it was very helpful. Current teachers, do we have the current staff to support something like this? Would our current technical programs allow them to teach 1 period a day in the academy? How many staff would we need? And do we have the college counseling capacity? Again, these are 5, 6, 7 questions of 150 that we could ask. On page 9, I did an estimated startup cost. This is strictly estimated for what we would need to start a program like this. Again, this is according to how many students we have. If we start with smaller amount of students, 25 to 30, these numbers would be less. The portable classrooms would not. That would be a hard cost. Some of the costs, including the infrastructure cost to the existing building to incorporate the modular classrooms. It's nice to have the classrooms, but there has to be some connection to the building. That's going to be some infrastructure costs. Obviously, college credit costs, technical equipment, and some of the, obviously the biggest cost is teachers, and if we could do that with the existing staff we have, or do we have to go and look at other staff? In conclusion, as I mentioned, this is strictly a feasibility stage. There needs to be much more planning and sustainability about our high school needs and if it fits in. I do think, after looking at our NEASC report that was last done 10 years ago, this would fit in well. This type of project would fit in well what they're looking at. And just to remind everybody one more time, our upcoming 10-year NEAS is going to happen at the end of 2020. While in the beginning stages, this request has much merit. When it was brought up, I thought it was going to be maybe a 1 to 2 page, 2-hour endeavor. We spent a lot of time looking at different endeavors and how to do this, and a couple of meetings with Vice Chair Bahu. I think it has merit, and I think we should explore further. I think we have a long way to go, and one of the steps I may suggest is perhaps if we look at what your thoughts may be, and maybe clarify some more thoughts from Vice Chair Bahu, maybe I can come back with a tighter report on and narrower in terms of what we may look at going forward. Can I entertain any thoughts or questions? And I know there's probably a million questions, because I have a few too, going forward. But I wanted to make sure we address the needs of a committee member. I think he spent a lot of good time on this. He did some homework, and he did convey that to me when I met with him a few times over the summer.
Okay, well, thank you for that report. It's well thought out, and there was a lot of work done to it, I can clearly see. And, this doesn't come overnight, so the motion was made back in June, and here we are in January, and we can tell that this was very well thought out. Before I ask sort of any questions, I'm sure, as you stated, you've covered maybe 7 to 10 of those questions, if not more. I think I'd like to go ahead and sort of turn it over to the school committee and see what they may have for questions as far as this endeavor goes. Mr. Booton?
Joe, page 9, a couple of questions. Portable classrooms, is that rent per year, or is that a one-time fee?
That's a one-time fee. Those would be, by the way, not new, they'd be used.
Used?
They'd be used, but we'd own them.
In the 150, does that include what you said the connection cost?
No, the connection cost would be different. I think it's 50,000. It's an estimate too. Could be more, a little less.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, one time for their technology equipment, one time, but then upgraded as we go. The teachers are I assume, are recurring instructional resources. I guess my point is, some of this stuff is going to be a one-shot deal. It's not going to be this amount every year. So the number's a lot less, right?
Yeah, this is a startup cost list.
Okay.
So we can
Well,
do
the teachers
multiple
is a
years.
startup, but that's a continuing cost. We're going to have to carry that forward. And then equipment's going to have to be changed every so often, and resources, you'll have to give that. College credits would be the same thing. That would be a yearly type fee. When I looked at this, it was like, that's a lot of money, but it's not really a lot of money, because if you diminish it over 10 years, it makes, I think, great sense. Do we have an estimate of how many of our existing students would be able to attend this? Are we going to cannibalize any of our current students, or would we be, have you given any thought to that?
I think the intention was that this would be a separate admissions program, similar to an exploratory into coming into the building. So there'd be a different admission policy to get in for we start with 30 slots. There'd be 30 slots that would be open. We'd have to create an admissions policy for those 30 positions for students, let alone the startup costs. And we enter students on top of our traditional enrollment numbers and our enrollment projections that we have set for next year. And, moving forward, next year, our enrollment projection for the freshman class, this year coming in, the ones came last night, is about 595. That's our projected number. That's what number we're trying to match for next year. This year, we were at the 600, 599, 600. We're projecting 595 coming in due to the fact of looking at our junior and senior numbers. So this would be on top of that. We'd have to also think about, again, questions come up. How do we deal with some of the support services? Special education, perhaps, for a student that may have a disability in the program. Counseling services, guidance counseling services. How do we integrate lunch? Obviously, that's a big deal for anything that we do in terms of the schedule. Obviously, PE, which we've listed, and some of the other services in place. And it may be, one of the things we were kind of thinking about this is an extended day program, that perhaps it doesn't follow the 2 to the 7:46 to 2:06 schedule, it may end at 2:06, and then from 2:06 to maybe 5 minutes of 3 might be project-based learning time, or independent learning, or kids work on their technology and engineering projects. That kind of came up too as we were designing the schedule and looking at that. So, a lot to think about.
Okay, next question, Mr. Gigi?
I just had one last
Follow
question.
up by Mr. Booton.
Just one last question. You said that you were going to bring languages in, or that was part of the component. And this ties into your response with my my motion that you also answered on. Are we missing out by not having languages at this school?
Yeah, I don't know if missing out is the right term. We do have an opportunity for kids to take a foreign language, and they do. Is it difficult with the structure of our schedule and the emphasis on the vocational program? Yes. Obviously, that's our mission and goal, and we spend most of our time and effort on that. If we had an extended period in the day, could we offer more? Yes. Can we emphasize and continue to emphasize kids to be able to take foreign language in an alternate manner, like some of the kids are through Ingenuity, our Ingenuity, which is the distance learning program? Yes. I think one of the larger questions that you brought up is to continue to look at our program of studies, our schedule of day, how we offer things during the day. And I think opportunity for offering a foreign language, which we've heard from some of our advisories, is vital. For example, our last advisory meeting, one of the things we heard from the medical and assisting advisors is that they wish that the students would have a second language to be able to communicate in their field. They thought that was vital. We reflected that in our notes. We understand that. So, somewhat, but the opportunity is there, and I think more is the structure. Looking at our structure is more of what we would need to do if we were to change that. Not may say foreign language for everybody. I mean, one of the options, we do have other things to look at. We teach a lot of PE. That may be an option. I'm not trying to put that on the table, but that may be an option for us to look at in terms of in the future.
For what it's worth, Mr. Superintendent, I'm not looking for foreign languages to come here. As far as the structure that most of us had when we were in high school, I would think conversational languages would be, if that's a better way to go, that if we are going to start looking at that, that can be kept in there, because most of us went to high school, had languages, still can't speak it, but I think conversational foreign languages could be beneficial to our students. Thank you.
Okay, next question by Mr. Gigi.
It looks like the preliminary numbers are around 625,000. If there are 60 students, that's a little over 10,000 per student. Where does the revenue come to meet that obligation? If we start with 30, then you're over 20,000. You're almost 24,000 per student.
Yeah.
So where does the revenue come from?
The revenue is going to be from our traditional Chapter 70 and my number. That's going to be our largest number, obviously, for revenue. Startup is going to be a little bit expensive, as you mentioned, but over a period of time, being able to expand kids according to teachers and a good class size, a suitable class size, and I think the return on investment of what we can produce for a student too would be able to maximize that return on investment. So coming out of the gate, it's going to be expensive. Down the line, it may be a little bit cheaper.
Because usually when you have startup costs, that's just the bare bones, and it's going to go up from there most likely.
There's going to be other costs. Once we start asking more questions, refining more things, it will be more expensive.
And your thoughts, is it something that would benefit the school overall?
I do. I think that I do think it has merit to look at that type of STEM academy, which is somewhat of a school within a school. Are we ready for this year, next year? No, maybe the year after. Yeah, I do think there may be an opportunity once we refine that. I do think the admissions policy is going to be a big piece for us, and making sure we refine that and create equity within the admissions policy and purpose and mission within that. I also think that, we've been seeing this over the past 3 to 4 or 5 years. There has been money attracted to these type of programs, and not only at our state, but at the national level. So you can foresee some seed money potentially coming available, grant money, to be able to start a program like this. We put 240 to kind of match up some numbers, but there's no way we would be able to do that today, tomorrow, in the next 2 to 3, 4, 5 years. 25 to 30 kids, yeah, it would take a lot of work, but we should be able to do that.
And can the physical plant that we have right now accommodate the additional students with the 2 classrooms?
As I said in the report, we kind of looked at that. Probably at this point, 50 to 75% yes, but not fully. And I can definitely foresee, brutally honest as usual, this is going to tax the school district tremendously if we did not have an alternate space area to house students like this, let alone the counseling services and some of the alternate services that we have.
Thank you.
Okay, question by Mr. Tatsias?
Yes. You know of any other schools that are doing something similar?
Not in Massachusetts, but one of the models we looked at was models outside of the country, the state. There's a lot of programs in Georgia and Alabama that are very similar, that have schools within schools. And we kind of looked at one school in Georgia that kind of matched up to this type of thought process. But it's it's unheard of in Massachusetts. In the vocational setting. As you know, there are Horace Mann charter schools and the comprehensive K-12 school districts that have schools within schools to do that. Past place I worked, I had an alternative school within a school. I had a school at the mall, which was an alternative school within our school district. So there's some programs like that, but a STEM academy within a vocational school, no, it's not in place yet.
When we had gone on a site visit a few years ago to the Upper Cape, they had a nursing school program, and the students and staff built the school. That it was a separate building on campus. Is it possible to do? I know for years we've been building a couple of houses here and then taking them down. It might incorporate that part of that into building, instead of having portable classrooms, a unit that it would take a few years, but getting something off the ground like this would.
Anytime instruction comes up in discussions with the administrative team here, space always becomes a prime discussion point. And it's not just, looking at the space we have now, but alternate. And we have talked about the house back there as a potential option. It would take a few years. We can't build on it now. The foundation is a practice foundation on the house
Right.
that the carpentry students work on. It is an option, obviously. Permitting, we've all been through that here and other places. Being so close to conservation land, not going to be impossible, but it's going to take some time to be able to do that. But I do think long-range space issues outside of this issue, I think that's a feasible thought process for us to look at in terms of looking at the buildings in back and potentially looking at potential classroom. For example, the alternative energy building is now used for classes. We use that for classes, not every period, but we do use it for classes. So kids do go there, into that center, into that area. And there's desks in there and chairs and technology, and they use it as an instructional classroom. Looking at our schedule, continuing to look at our schedule and how we move classes in the building, I think I know the principals work very hard with that, and the guidance counselor, the director of guidance has worked on that. And I do think we're going to have a definitive plan for some space, freeing up some space starting in September for some of the areas in the building. And we've started to look at those 4 to 5 areas that we may have to do a little construction to to facilitate that. That would be outside, obviously, this project.
Okay, I think I have a few questions. Oh, Mr. O'Hare, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just listening to this for a while, and I give you credit for all the work you put into this. However, I have quite a few questions to ask about this. Anytime, we seem to have everything going pretty good at the school right now, with the number of students we have, with the number of students that we have spaces for, should they come in. But what is this, our whole function, and every time we have a meeting here, somehow or another, MCAS pops up. We just went through a slideshow a couple of meetings ago on this, and to me, it sounds like it's taking time away from some of that learning time where someone could be really trying to hit the top of the barrel with the MCAS scores, so that it would be in the top percentile. As far as I'm not a big believer of putting the wooden buildings adjacent to it temporarily or permanently, whatever it is that you're going to put on. In this particular school, and I think you may have hit on it, we build a school a classroom or a school or a building any given time. And I've seen all different ways that they have made this production. Now, the reason I bring this up as far as doing something internally, how much are we going to allow schools, cities, towns to keep borrowing money, and keep borrowing money? We never seem to get to pay the bill, all right? And I think the projections that you get, I think we still have a big responsibility that we haven't reached the top level at this particular point, and that means all passing MCAS or fairly close to it. As far as the buildings that are here now, that the students built, if in fact you were going to go this route, maybe rather than build the same building every year, putting it up, taking it down, putting it up, and I think I know the background of this, which is a good one, why not just build another class rather than going out and buying or leasing a portable? That makes more sense to me.
And I think Mr. Tatsi has touched on that.
I'm just mentioning that to him, yes. I know at one time there were houses built on site and sold to certain people, and I think that was the end of it, of building houses and then somebody out and, buying them, because they always thought somebody might be, it was kind of hard to decide who was going to get the house. But my point is, why are we talking about portables? Why don't you build one yourself?
Right now, Mr. O'Hare, I actually think this is in its infancy stage, so, we're just throwing around some general thoughts.
Sometimes, excuse me.
More than anything, Mr. O'Hare, and I don't mean to interrupt,
Yeah.
but we still have to have the state approve this. So we can look at, how we're going to go ahead and implement it, but until the state approves it, we can't necessarily do it anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so you're going to get something approved, and then you're going to think of getting a portable or doing it yourself, basically is what you're saying, all right? And I'm saying that I don't see why we need other portables at this building, or this. The only schools that I know of in this area, and there have been many that have had portables, but they've taken them out once they've reached their goal, I don't know of anybody that has a portable that they're leaving there. I take that back. The
Washington School has some portables.
the school out in the private school that's out further in this area on the other side of the river, they have,
Innovation Academy.
yeah, they must have bought 6, 7, 8 portable schools that they're there, and I think they're there permanently. But, we're beyond that here. We have facilities. We have, what makes and what are we talking about? 595, 600 students that we have in the building? That could be fluctuating this particular.
Well, our student body is out.
Isn't there another? You got one of the biggest cafeterias in the state, the way it is now. But temporarily, we had that zoned off when the building was still going up, that's an additional piece that you don't have to pay for. I'm saying this really because, and maybe I'm thinking the wrong road, but there is so much going on in this area. I don't want to just say Lowell or Drake or whatever else. Everybody is taking out a loan. Everybody is getting, using money constantly. And they're wondering why they don't have any money left. And this is exactly, I think, what would happen. You're going to be spending all sorts of money, and I don't know, what is it, going to be 50 extra students you're going to have with all that money you're going to spend?
Right. So I think
That's my
Right.
negativity on this.
And my guess is that's a conversation for another time.
Well, it's not really a guess,
Well,
it's not a
It's a
guess.
conversation for another time, is
Yeah.
what it is. It's
Well,
not necessarily the conversation that we need to have right now, because we haven't
first
implemented anything.
First, well, you wanted me to answer a question, I just answered the question. I'm telling you what I think. You asked, I think you prefaced this, anybody else have anything to say? And I'm saying it right now.
Yes.
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
let's give another school committee member, put his 2 cents in, Mr. Lemay.
Well, I think this is a good dialogue, though. It's a good start-up conversation. I think there's a lot of good points, but I think there's some questionable points, obviously. My major concern would be, and we talk about it every year, is Chapter 70 money, as the superintendent mentioned. We're always cautious as to what we're getting. Will it be enough? Where's it going to go? And although it looks good this year, and the governor's been good, and the legislature was just looking at some things more favorably lately, with this new legislature, I think it's worth looking into, but I don't know where the revenue will come from. It seems to be questionable. If it was guaranteed every year, that'd be one thing, but I don't think we want to be robbing Peter to pay Paul as far as what we have already. But I think further dialogue and some meetings would be good, and like to see where it advances in the future. I think it's a good endeavor to look into, and I appreciate the making of a motion and the superintendent putting the time in necessary to give us this report.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Lemay. Okay, I have a couple of questions. I hate to take too much time up. But I think the first question is, in this report, it states there could be as many as 240 students in this program. So it would be more or less a advanced placement program, where some of our students, Mr. Mastrocola, could go ahead and, this wouldn't just be for new students coming in, this would be for an overall school body. And, Mr. Tatsy has touched on it, does any other school in the state do it? The answer is unfortunately not, so we don't have that guideline, but I'm sure the state is looking at some type of vocational programming to sort of, Charlie Baker's office, our governor's office, and the Secretary of Education have talked about how they can keep moving vocational education forward. And to put this into our programming, which is engineering, or some of you actually mentioned 4 separate types of STEM academies. So this would incorporate right into our programming. So that could work well as well. Modular classroom. Sure, Mr. O'Hare, let's build our own building. I think that's not a bad idea if we can get away with it. But just for the sake of, argument, question, how many students does a modular classroom hold?
Between 25 to 30.
25 to 30. So one modular classroom would hold up to 30. Okay, and if we started at a lower level, instead of 60 students, 60 additional students, would we still have to staff 4 full-time teachers, or could we do it with 2 full-time teachers? Half the students, half the teachers, but I'm gonna guess not, because you're still offering full programming, is that correct?
We looked at that, we kind of looked at, can we use some of our existing staff to teach some of the classes and do some cross-reference, and perhaps that could take place. But regardless, I think at some point we're gonna need staff members to be able to facilitate the need, whatever that need is, whatever the number is gonna be also.
Okay, and you mentioned, these would be used modular classrooms. So that begs the question, what is the shelf life of a modular classroom? Do they last 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, 3 years, generally speaking? Because, you got to think about replacement costs and such like that.
Anywhere between 15 to 20 years.
They last as long as 15. And by these being used, does that mean they would only be 2 years old, or does that mean they would
Get
be
the
more
ones
like-
that are gently used if we had to do it.
Okay, gently used. Okay, so, can we move this forward? Is there anyone that we can contact in the state to discuss this? I mean, will the state approve something like this? This is
There's
what-
a couple questions there. Would the state approve it? Hard to know. As I mentioned, I think the hardest part is looking at our mission and being able to understand what our mission is as a governing body here. And obviously, the stakeholders in the school, the teachers and the administrators, having a stake in that decision-making process, and obviously some students too. After that, looking at and getting, as Mr. Bahu said, I think getting some support from a feasibility standpoint from the state or some of the state stakeholders, perhaps MAVA, perhaps some of the people who are involved at the national level with vocational education, with a feasibility study, to help put a feasibility study to look at something like this. And then second, I do think, at your wish, is for me to get with a few of my administrators, and maybe I can narrow this down just a little, based upon your feedback tonight, and kind of narrow that down, and I obviously look at the space issue and narrow down hard costs about, the modules, if we have to even do that, the teacher component. And then, I think as we go through our budget process, we may be able to keep this in the back of our mind. We have something in front of us now with a current budget that we're going to be talking about in the next month as we get into our budget meeting, and keeping that in the back of our mind as we start planning for resources here and how we can maximize and look at efficient resources. So the short answer is I would welcome an opportunity to continue working on this and come back to the committee at a later date with some little narrower focus, perhaps after we talk a little bit further.
Okay, sure, Mr.
I just
Lemay.
ask, when you're looking into a little further, because I don't know the answer to this question, but as far as grant monies made available for a STEM program or anything, I don't know if that's a category that they look at or
Yeah, it is.
would
It's
look at.
it's a very active category, and we're on the cusp of applying for one now, an actual STEM classroom with equipment. That's state-of-the-art, the new state-of-the-art innovative STEM classroom. We almost can look at it, as you mentioned, as a backward design. Look at the resources first, and then how do we back into that? But that would be on a very, very small scale. It wouldn't be like a large scale here, but that's an option to kind of look at it that way. Looking from a backward design type of component, I think that's viable. And there's a lot of resources for STEM, obviously.
Mr. Gigi.
Briefly, I enjoy being innovative, and I think a lot of time and effort went into this, but I think we have to look at, number one, the mission, and then our wish list. Where on the wish list does this program fall? Because we want fields, we want security. Where in the pecking order does this project fall? It is interesting. It doesn't seem like it's applied throughout the country in great numbers, and one or two states maybe are looking into it and the results. So I guess I want a little bit of a priority. What are we considering is priority with our mission? And we have a lot of things here, and sometimes doing a program like this might be more beneficial if our wish list was all fulfilled. And then we can look outside and take on a new endeavor. I like it. I think it's great, but does it fit on our agenda?
Sure, and there are a lot of questions here, and I agree with you to the degree that, are we totally, full here in everything that we do, and do we do it all perfectly, and our MCAS score is wonderful, and are we graduating at 100%, and is our attendance at 100%? The answer is no. However, there are some hardships out there. There's one hardship happening in Lowell, and it will be happening for the next number of years, which is a renovation of a high school. And so that's something to consider. The other hardship is that Tingsboro is growing more rapidly now than it ever has, and so isn't Drake. So do they have enough capacity in their schools to house all the students that their growth of their towns are increasing at? You know, I mean, we have a former school committee member from Drake, right? Matt, who's our newest school committee member. What's the capacity of the Drake High School? Is it fully capacitated, or is it more like 80%?
I would probably guess 85% right now,
Okay, and,
I think.
right, and Drake is still growing, although it's not growing as rapidly as it was about 5 years ago. Is that correct?
No, they're more, they're getting a lot more commercial now in Drake in certain areas. But I mean, if you go out 110, they're still building houses out there, so.
Okay, so there are some hardships for other communities. And just for the sake of argument, one last thing that I want to say, and I will back off of this statement, off of this conversation. The original motion was to go ahead and start an academic program here. Just an academic program that would be separate from our vocational program, simply because of the hardship that is happening over in Lowell. And with that being the case, I see startup costs here, right? And it's somewhere around $650,000, and it would be great if we could get some type of grants and such like that. But let's say we didn't receive any grants. Would the startup costs still be the same? Would we still need 4 full-time teachers? Would we still need, I'm gonna guess we would still need some type of build-out of, a cost for $150,000. Would we still need more technology equipment, more technical equipment, more college credit fees? So would some of those costs still be there, or would some of those costs be eliminated?
Some of them would be there. And that is how many students that we select coming right in terms of the academics. Yeah, there would be some hard costs there. Some of those would be very similar. Again, going back to the space, if the modular component isn't there, we can do it within ourselves. Yeah, that's the second largest cost, initial startup cost going forward. But looking at our, what our mission is in enrollment going forward too, we look like we're at the number that we intend to be at for years to come. I don't see that changing in terms of the number, what we have here, about 2250 going forward. I don't anticipate us going over into the 2300 range, or dipping below the 2250. So I think that's going to play part of a decision-making process first. And then our existing programs, and continuing to look at our 23 programs. You made a conscious effort and a commitment to expand one of the programs last year, the health assisting program, which facilitated 40 kids. And I think those are the type of decisions and type of things we should be looking at as part of a big picture, with this being part of it, and something that might be, coming to us 2 to 3 years down the line for a vocational high school, such as artificial intelligence. Probably going to be one of the biggest fields 5 years from now. So how do we be able to, as a vocational high school, plan for those type of changes and facilitate a curriculum and services around that, So I think that's a bigger thought process.
Okay, Mr. Booton.
Just doing the quick numbers, at 40, let me ask you this, Mr. Superintendent, what do we get per child? Desi, is it 16, 17,000?
It's about 17,000, yeah.
So 17,000, if 40 kids come in at $17,000, that's $680,000. That covers the first year. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these are just fixed costs. They're not variable costs that we have every year. So the 680 that we would get for the 40 students would cover the initial startup also. You're not just making an investment, it's going to cover that. We go to the second year, we have 80 kids. Now you're up to $1.3 million. And those startup costs are gone, and we're only supporting the teachers. So this is actually generate income, and it would be income positive for the school. So anybody who's concerned about that, if you add the numbers up, and then once we get up to 240, you're looking, I think it was 3 million.
But there's going to be space constraints, is what I keep hearing.
So we have to build on or
As
add
long as
or.
the state allows us, right? Always comes back to the state.
The other thing I think we should take a hard look at as we go forward, where, if we eliminate a technical program, this could fit in as a technical program. You know, we got rid of small engine repair. If we got rid of another technical program, that would free up some more space. We wouldn't need those outside spaces, and this could, it's not quote-unquote a technical program, but it would give us the space, and it would give us an addition that we could have.
As long as the
So
state
there's
would approve it.
options we can do without putting the modulars on. And I think for the sake of seeing what we can do go forward with, why not be on the cusp? Why not be pushing the envelope? You got a Congresswoman Trahan talking about it today, how vocational education, technical education is important. The state wants more technical education. Why can't we spearhead this? What is it going to hurt us to move forward and ask those questions?
Sure, New Hampshire's doing the exact same thing.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I think we all
We're
lost.
still also gonna have overhead, you know, utilities and lighting and stuff like that. You know, as the superintendent spoke about up and coming technical areas, we spoke earlier this year about Homeland Security. We got possibly in the works. So, I mean, there's a lot on the plate. I think you had a great introduction. I see you did a lot of work here, or maybe more than one person did. And I think we brought up a lot of good questions. And I think that there's more homework to be done, and perhaps we could move it along.
Sure. I think that's a very good statement. I think everybody here had some great input. And just for one closing statement, we're going to let Mr. O'Hare do the final statement, and then we're going to move on to our next subject.
Okay, and very short, this is a very short statement. We love this building. We love this whole school. It's a beautiful place. We got great students downstairs, we have great teachers, we have everything. But how many industries do you know have these big, big places, and then they shut them down at night? Why not do exactly the same thing you're talking about, but doing it in the evening? You're getting the same value, you're getting the same information that you're trying to announce to us, but you have, for example, this, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to design anything, but at the end of the day, that's just sit here. No, this building, just this classroom, conference room, just sits here. Why not use what you have, rather than going out and getting taxpayers' money again, grants from other groups, which are taxpayers, that's me, the taxpayer. All right, and why wouldn't you consider something like that? I don't say you have to do it, but the more I think of these things, they just sit here. Beautiful buildings sitting here.
It's a great thought. It's a great thought, and we're going to close on that, just so that we can keep this meeting moving forward. I think that we touched on a lot of different thoughts on this thing, and I'm sure maybe we can have the superintendent move forward with this thing, but he does have lots of other things here to do, considering, we have budget time coming up here, as well as a new business manager, so there's plenty of different things to do. So, moving forward in this meeting, we're going to address your next piece, Mr. Superintendent.
Next item on the agenda was a request for information on the relationship of community college and local universities in relation to dual enrollment in some of the courses that we're offering with dual enrollment. I want to thank Mr. Barton for some assistance in putting this report together. On the second page of the report is listed some statistics of our dual enrollment program in our coordination of who we work with, Middlesex Community College and UMass Lowell and Quincy College. You can see some of the numbers, the cost of the courses listed there. One of the things that we've been working towards as a leadership team is looking at what may be the best way to offer these accelerated courses, whether through dual enrollment or through the AP process. That's a usual discussion that high schools have in terms of what may be the best way to offer those accelerated courses. I can tell you that we've strongly looked at perhaps moving towards more AP courses in conjunction with the dual enrollment courses for a variety of different reasons. The AP courses have been popular in our school. As you know, you approved one last year in my budget. We have another one coming in the budget process next month that I'm going to put on the table for your approval. We currently have the following AP courses: Studio Arts, Principal of Computer Science A, Language and Composition, Literature and Composition, Environmental Science. However, we do have a relationship with Quincy College. We have 69 students enrolled in the dual enrollment program that take those courses. I also added, based upon that discussion we've had with the administrative team, some literature on AP, and that's a document provided by Mass Insight. And I wanted to just mention the first sentence in that article. It says, beyond college credit, leveraging AP as an effective workforce strategy. I do think our leadership team has talked about this immensely. I can foresee that in the future, as we start looking at our academic program, that we'd see more AP courses. Personally, I think that's important and the way we should be going, if you ask me for my vision. I think we're putting rigor in our courses, continuous rigor, with assistance to help students and being able to push students to keep reaching higher for rigorous-based courses is where we should be going. This is on the academic side. I do think it has, the research is there. You'll see some of that research in the article I had given you about moving forward with relationship to the workplace and 21st century skills. Do we have more work to do? When this report was requested, it really opened up our thought process about, are we doing the right thing? Do we have the right relationships? And I do think that we have a lot more work to do with the college relationship, specifically with UMass Lowell. We have already put something in motion. We're meeting with a college later this month to look at potentially a different dual enrollment relationship that might be a little bit more cost-effective for us. I do think I personally need to spend a little bit more time with the local university and do a better job reaching out and connecting with them. And I can make that promise to this committee that I'm going to continue to do that. All in all, I'd like to see us get a little bit more of our students involved in AP, let alone dual enrollment. I think our commitment, principal, Mr. Barton, the director of curriculum, our cluster leaders, support of ingenuity, which is the distance learning component, and being able to have that as an opportunity for our students, which has grown over the last 3 years here tremendously, has been positive. But all in all, I think we need to do a better job as a school district in terms of offering and making those connections with schools. So this was a good eye-opener for us to look at some things and look at these pathways and expectations and how we'd like to move forward and continuing to reach out. And today I was at UMass Lowell. It was a little coincidence with the meeting with the Middlesex 3 group, and was able to make a few connections there and to get some things in motion for us also. So it's good.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Booton, question?
Just want to say thank you to you and your team for the report. Reading through this, it helped me. I was pushing more for dual enrollment. Part of my reason for making this was, how can we do more dual enrollment? But after reading the backup information, how the accreditation works for the AP, you gave me a better understanding that this is going to be more beneficial for our students, and I'm glad that's the direction you and the team is taking this. I did have one question, if you can get back to me. We went from 64 students in school year 16-17 that took AP exams. We're up to 90. Where will we be at the end of this year? That's like midway down that second page. If we can find out, I'd love to know that number. Everything else, again, appreciate everything. The last paragraph that you have on the next page, our relationship with Middlesex, do we have any focus? Do we have any plans, future plans to have our manufacturing a different component where there's a night school component. On the same tier of what Mr. O'Hare was saying, we have this building. I was downstairs earlier, and the night school was just starting, and everybody was out in the hall, so it was nice to see our school is being used at night for other endeavors. But is there a way to tie in the future with Middlesex, some sort of associate degree? It's been talked about for the 6 years I've been here. Are we any closer to getting there?
Yeah, we work with Middlesex with a variety, as you know, all of you know, with a variety of different programs. And we have good articulation agreements with them, and they're frequently grant partners. When we apply for a grant, we need a partner, we need a letter of reference, we need a letter of support, and they're usually there. Specifically about the manufacturing, we did have a down year this year. We normally had the manufacturing evening program here on site. It was a grant program that Middlesex won that we were part of. Last year, they didn't get the grant. So we don't have the program this year. This is a program about 25, 30 students from Middlesex that came here during the evening. It was about a all 2-semester program, 16 week, 15 weeks, something like that. We were anticipating having it again. We have our instructors, some of our instructors were teaching that. They didn't get the grant. They anticipate they're going to reapply for it. We'll be part of that group again. Hopefully we'll get it, and we'll start that manufacturing program again. That was a lost opportunity that I think hurt us a little bit as a school district. Also, we've got some revenue from that, that we missed. Not a lot, but some revenue that we missed with that. Anytime we can connect with any university, college, business component, I think there's always tree branches that kind of branch out with that. They've been a good partner, and I want to continue to work with them. And we host them frequently here for meetings also as part of the culinary program. But
At
that's
night?
a good point. During the day.
Okay.
Meetings during the day. Yeah.
Are there any other programs that we can work an associate's degree with what we have here for our facilities? Is there anything else we're exploring?
Yeah, I think the health, the two key advisors in our advisory board is around health assisting. They're from Middlesex. They're very helpful in terms of offering support with us. And then we have our, program, our feeder program from our health assisting and medical program right to Middlesex. Is there, I'd like to see us do a little bit more. Mr. said earlier about the cybersecurity. I think that's where, our relationship should go with the college at this point.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, question by Mr. O'Hare.
Yeah, I think we had an agreement one time with Riviera College, and we had students going up there. I don't know if that program's still in existence, but that was quite I think some students got admitted there also, but they took courses up there with the approval of Riviera.
Thank you.
All done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your superintendent's report, Mr. Mastrocola. Okay, and now a report of our business manager. No report this evening. Wonderful. Now, under old.
Like you, George. No news is good news.
Under old business, let's, Mr. Booton, are you okay with item number 7?
Remove number 7,
Report our
absolutely.
ongoing and planned future relationship with Middlesex Community College and University of Mass Lowell. And as far as the conversation that we had tonight, I'm sure we can still keep that open in case we'd like to maybe revisit that soon. Okay? Okay, now under new business, are there any items? I'm sorry? Oh, okay, well, I'm gonna move the motion to amend the regional agreement to new business. It could be satisfied either way, but, I'm gonna read a motion. It's hereby motion to remove the current language of section 1, last page in your booklet. It's hereby motion to remove the current language of section 1, paragraph E of the agreement with respect to the establishment of the vocational regional school district, and by replacing it with the following language. The term of the office of any elected member from a member town and any elected member from the city of Lowell shall commence on January 1 next following the election of such member. At the first meeting in January each year, the committee shall organize and choose by ballot, a chairman, a vice chairman, and a secretary from among its own membership that shall be their appointment as of February 1. This motion was written by me, so if I could have a second for it. Thank you, Mr. Tatsias.
Was this looked at through legal counsel?
Yes, Mr.
Maccaro.
Mr. Maccaro actually looked at this and sort of came up with this revised motion on what we had discussed last meeting. And this is simply based on our, new format of vote, district-wide vote, that would, end in November every other year, that's going to be on the state ballot, so that we can have more of a proper language, a little tidying, a little cleanup, to start our newest members on a certain date, to vote on our chairman on that same date when these newest members come in, they can vote on the chairman, and they can, we can begin to move forward in our agenda from that from that date forward. This is about just tidying up some language when we used to vote a little bit differently. With each town voting one in April, one in May, one in November of different years, one 3-year term, one 4-year term. That is all gone. So this is more about sort of just making sure that everything is sort of uniform and tidied up and keeping things in order.
Are we on to the discussion side of this right
Of
at the
course, so
moment?
yeah, let's get to the discussion.
Says the term of office of any elected member from a member town. Why do we add language "and any elected member from the city of Lowell"? That sounds duplicative, and we can remove that part of it. Just take out "and any elected member from the city of Lowell."
Okay, well,
The member town,
sure, I think, 'cause I think the difference is a town and the city is a city. So we could call it the town and the city, any member town or city.
right.
And/or,
Okay, and we don't have to mention Lowell unless we want to mention.
Well, no,
Dunstable,
just think,
Tingsboro, and
let's
Drake.
keep it simple.
The district is the district.
Right.
Sure, if we could have
That
Mr.
all-
Maccaro come up here and speak on this for a moment.
Just to address that one point, if you turn to the last page of this packet, right, I think it's helpful to look at that. Yeah, there's the motion, which was the second to last page, and then the last page shows what the current language is, and then the proposed language, which is what Mr. Bahu read. When we drafted this, your current language actually says the term of office of any elected member town and the city of Lowell. That's the only reason why we kept that language. As I looked at it, I thought the same thing, that it might be duplicative, but as your current language already has that, and you're going to have to present, if you decide to approve this motion and this amendment, we still have to present, this is just the beginning of that process. You still have to present it to DESI for their approval, and then to your member towns. So the only reason why I kept it the same was just to track as much of the language that was the same as possible.
Like all lawyers.
Caution.
It concludes that the district is comprised of a municipality and the towns
Yeah,
within.
because right now, again, it's your member towns, and then you've got a city, so, that's the only reason why. I mean, I don't think there would be any reason why you couldn't change it if you decided to, but that was the reason for it.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Yeah, I just go over that again, I'm kind of missing it. So if you get elected, first year, wherever it is, Lowell, Drake, or Tingsboro, you're elected. Now, the terms of being elected are different. Now, how are we going to adjust those? So if you're the chairman this year, and 3 years or 4 years later, you're still the chairman.
So each year, annually,
it's gonna be
every
done
year in
each year?
January, you're going to, if you look at the language, each year, you're going to organize and select your officers.
Amongst ourselves.
amongst yourselves.
And that's gonna be done in January.
Every January, new officers.
Okay,
Coincides with the election.
yeah.
Instead of April 1st, it'll be
Yeah,
January.
your current language is strange because
Okay.
you have members that,
different.
some were taking office in January. You know, the town people took place immediately afterwards, but you weren't holding your elections till April. That's been in you've been in your regional agreement for years, but doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
So,
They were
okay,
also for different terms.
okay.
Next question by Mr. Booton.
A couple, so I'd like to, first, there's a suggestion, I'd like to see language in there. If somebody, say Mr. Bahu's the chairperson and he resigns in June, we need to have some sort of, something in writing of what we're going to do to have a chairperson.
Vice chair moves up, right?
There's nothing in writing. We've done it, he's been covering the meetings, but at a certain point, you know, we can leave it that way, and you can have the vice chair run the meeting, and we have no chairperson of the school committee for 6 months? Or do we put it in there that there's a vote for a new chairperson, or does the vice chair move up? You can add in whatever you want, but I think there should be language in there to state it. Most importantly, it's not so much the chair or the vice chair, it's actually the secretary that I think is probably the most important. Because when I was as secretary, when we were doing the school building project, I had to actually sign the loan documents. I don't know if anybody else, did you have to do it, Curtis, when you were?
I think I had to do it.
Paul, when you were secretary, you had to, so there's certain things legally that the chair, vice chair, and the secretary have to do, so that's why I think it should be spelled out that you always have those three on there in case we need something required by the state by a loan. Who would have thought if we didn't go through this process, you have to have a secretary sign the loan order?
Sure. So let's go ahead and amend the motion and add if the chairman
It could also
resigns.
be a health issue.
Absolutely.
Anything could
Anybody
happen.
resigns, any officer
Any-
resigns.
Right.
I would like to see if somebody resigns midway, we can, the committee can re-vote for that position.
If any one of the officers resigns,
And if the vice chair was voted into chair, then that would create another opening. You'd then vote in a new vice chair.
of course, if any one of the officers resigns, we would go ahead
At
at
the
the
next
following meeting, have a new vote from our elected members to choose to fill that seat.
To fill the vacancy
To fill
or
the
any
vacancy.
subsequent
vacancies.
vacancy.
And then I had one other question. I'll use Mr. Bahu again. Mr. Bahu's the chairperson. He doesn't run for reelection. Somebody new comes in, his last meeting is December. Would that be right?
Based on this proposal.
Based on
yes.
this, your last meeting would be December. We would have a new meeting with no chairperson to run it. I think the vice chair would run it at that point.
Sure.
We don't need to put anything in.
Well, you know, I mean, that begs the question.
Oh, yeah.
If the chairman
Robert's
decides not to
rules
run, the vice chair doesn't win,
Covers
the
that.
secretary decides not to run, who at that point would run the meeting?
So the first meeting in January, you could be in a position if all three didn't run or got voted out. So we have to account for that type of a scenario.
Those,
Well,
I think those scenarios are spelled out under Robert's rules, which most organizations go by.
What are they? I don't know them. I don't know what you would do if,
As far as succession,
yeah.
Well, I think in Robert's Rules of Order, your most senior, whoever the most senior, like, let's say that scenario happened, right? And the board's pretty much wiped out and it's a brand-new board. Your most senior person would chair that first meeting.
Okay.
I think it's written out in that.
yeah.
We have a 3-5 situation, so we're always gonna have at least, if all 5 got voted off, you'd still have 3 members. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure, I appreciate that.
If there's
I
further
wasn't sure.
clarification, I'm sure.
So refer to Robert's rules.
Yeah, I believe, Robert's rules is a little thick, I don't have it
No,
fully
it's
memorized
super
for
thick.
you, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty, if I did, I'd feel pretty bad about myself, but I believe that would be addressed in there, and we could handle that.
Okay.
But I do think
Thank
it might
you.
be wise to add in language, as you first suggested, about someone vacates the seat.
Okay,
It could be done very easily.
thank you for my comments. I'm done.
Perfect.
Thanks
Anybody
for
else?
bringing it up.
Speaking for Drake, this isn't, our next town meeting is in June, so this wouldn't be taken up in Drake till June.
But we're hoping Desi would approve it before June.
But I don't think it's gonna matter because we don't have another election coming up until 2 years.
A year and a half.
I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there, that we don't have another
Unless
town
somebody
meeting till June.
resigns.
It doesn't,
Or
I
something
think it's
happens
short
to them.
time. I don't be surprised if it would happen.
I don't know.
Would,
I don't know how
would
long
it
takes.
make sense, again, I don't think, from what I'm hearing, I don't think timing is such an essence for you to
Yeah.
get this done, and there is a long process. Given the concern, would you like me to redraft this motion with language for you to take a look at? I can have that for you at your next meeting in February.
Sure, I don't think time is, we're in no rush for this, we're trying to clean it up and clarify it as best as we can.
Can I ask Mr. Shand, what's the process for Drake? Like, how far ahead would they have to get
45 days.
our so if we got it in February, your June is your meeting?
June, yeah.
Oh, so you'd still have time to,
I think I'm pretty sure it's 45 business days, so we would have to present it to the Board of Selectmen, they make a recommendation, and I'm pretty sure they would present it on town meeting floor,
okay.
just for the language change. And then Paul and I would just stand there and field
So
questions or
you'd
anything
have
like
enough
that.
time to do that.
Well, we could approve it
Well,
now,
let me
because we
just
still
ask
have to
the-
send it to Desi, and the question becomes, how long is it gonna take Desi to approve this?
Yeah,
So-
well, maybe they
I'd rather do the language now then, because I forgot, we've got to do the DESI step, and that if it's
Deal with Desi, and then it's gonna go to
45 days is 9
Dunstable,
weeks for them,
Tingsboro,
and there's holidays.
Dracut, and Lowell. It
Yeah.
actually has to
Wait a
go
minute,
to
it-
four communities.
We have a November.
We got another year, too.
What would happen, and it's happened in the past, if the board, you have your board organized. If for some reason the chairman gives it up, sickness or whatever, that space is open. Whoever is, yeah, of course, this is a different ballgame now with different towns. The next person next in line would move up to the chairmanship.
Not necessarily, I don't
They
think.
always have.
Right, right, and
No,
all
it
we're
has-
saying,
yeah,
put it in
always
writing.
has,
yeah, we're
but
saying to
it
put it in
happens.
writing to
We're
vote for
asking
the
to
new
put that in
chairman,
writing,
or vote
George.
for the new fill.
That was an automatic move up the line.
Right, but let's say the secretary resigned, or the
Once the
secretary got
line
beaten
is
in the election.
established,
So that wasn't necessarily moving up the
Yeah.
line.
they would move up, yeah. Once we know who the
Yes,
chair,
yes,
the vice
yeah.
chair, the secretary is, if something
Yep.
happened, that would.
Yep, all right.
Can we just add the language now, or?
Sure, I think that would be the simplest thing, Mr. McCarroll,
Yeah, I
simply
mean-
because of time and, going to 4 communities as well as Desi having to approve this.
So in anticipation of this, I drafted the following. Should one of the elected officers resign or vacate their committee seat prior to the conclusion of their term as an officer, the school committee shall, at its next regularly scheduled meeting, select a replacement member to serve the remainder of the term.
But
Sounds
that isn't the way it was.
But this is what we were
Exactly.
suggesting it to be.
What's the advantage of that?
Simply because,
What's the advantage or the disadvantage?
simply because if a secretary resigned, or a secretary got.
Well, secretary is in the bottom of the,
That's correct,
Yeah,
so
so
let's say a
somebody would fill in
secretary, let's say a secretary got beaten in an election, or
but
decided
someone
not to
is the
run.
chairman and resigns. Normally, that would be the vice chair that would come up and fill that place.
Sure, and we're just looking to change the language a little bit to go ahead and have, if the chairman resigns,
Yeah.
not to have the vice chair just move in the position, have the board, as a body, go ahead and vote for who's going to be the chairman.
Okay, does that mean that everybody in line after that moves up if there's a spot open?
voted.
Why are you doing that when there's a package already resolved? It has been resolved for about 30 years.
I think this is just some housekeeping issue. I mean, in Drake, I hate to keep saying in Drake every time, but in Drake, like, let's say whoever was the chairman at the time, they lost, didn't seek to run.
Yeah.
Health issue.
Yep.
We would just convene in either I don't think it was an executive session, and just put on there, new election of a chairman. Everybody would vote. It's done.
And most likely, the vice chair would say, I'll move up, and it would be.
That's correct.
That's what we
More than
should
likely, that's
do.
what
We
we-
should just
we
have it in
end up
writing
doing.
that we're gonna do that. If there's no secretary, George, we should be able to
Well,
vote that
well.
there's a secretary.
Most likely, I missed that. Most likely, that's what you should do. The simplest thing is, you just move up the ladder.
I think that's easy
don't agree with
for, I think that would be easy for, if you had your chair resign, then the vice chair would
Yeah.
move up. I think the biggest issue that I'm hearing from this group is what happens if the secretary, who then becomes the
It'd move up, the
secretary.
secretary would move up to
Yeah, but who fills the
If
secretary?
the secretary leaves,
position that was vacant.
Happen secretary.
Oh, that's a good, I never ran into that situation.
But now that we're doing this and we're
Might as
sending
well
it to
cover
the
them all.
towns, that's why I'm suggesting we do this.
Again, I think Robert's Rules of Order might address that, again, but not having it memorized, I don't know, this would
would you put
Let's,
that on your
let's put
agenda?
it, let's put it in writing that we do
Lowell's
this,
case
so
is by charter.
in case that happens, George, we have it in writing that we'll take the vote. If there's a secretary missing, you'll vote on it. Okay?
I'm voting for
Sure.
George.
So let's,
Yeah, me too. I'm gonna vote for you.
yeah, can we, excuse me, Mr. McCarroll, could you, read
that
that
again?
motion back to us, please?
Sure. So this would be added on as maybe a new paragraph to what you have. Should one of the elected officers resign or vacate their school committee seat prior to the conclusion of their term as an officer, the school committee shall, at its next regularly scheduled meeting, select a replacement member to serve the remainder of the term.
One brief question, are there any notice requirements to address that prior to the meeting?
The next school, 72 hours, open meeting,
It was on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay,
open
Like we
meeting.
always do with the reorg of the board.
all right.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Tatsias?
Yes.
Mr. Gigi?
Yes.
Mr. O'Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
yes.
Mr. Bahu?
Yes.
Mr. Booton?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Okay. That was under old business. Under new business, there is. I'd like to propose a finance committee meeting on Thursday, February 7 at 5 PM to discuss our fiscal year 2020 budget.
Sorry, February 5th?
February 7,
7.
which is a Thursday at 5 PM, if possible.
February 7th?
That's correct.
I'm looking at January.
Does 5 PM work for
Maybe,
I'm good.
Mr. Booton's okay?
maybe.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Giggy's okay?
I don't
Okay.
take up where Espinola used to be.
Anybody else? February 7, 5 PM, meeting for our finance year 2020 budget.
Sounds good.
Is okay with that date? Okay. Let it be written.
She'll send out a notice anyway.
Okay, great. And then, so do we have any committee person motions? If there are none, report of subcommittees? There are none. So, maybe
Motion to
somebody could, Mr. Booton, a motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. O'Hare. Roll call.
Mr. Tatsias?
Yes.
Mr. Gigi?
Yes.
Mr. O'Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Moran? Mr. Bahu? Mr. Booton?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.